Hello, in this video, I'm going to try to explain how at Routine we use Notion and Super.so to create a knowledge base, like a public documentation, as you can see on the screen, very, very easily, and what actually it provides in terms of benefits. So let's go. So the first thing is, let's talk about the problems. The problem with existing knowledge bases of large companies like MailChimp, for instance. If you go to MailChimp and you type like automation, most likely you will end up with something like this, a page that explains how to set up a classic automation. It looks pretty straightforward. The problem is that if you do use MailChimp, you will know that those things actually do not exist in the product. Those screens do not exist. It's completely outdated. So in effect, the team at MailChimp maintaining the public documentation cannot keep track of what is actually getting released and cannot update the documentation on time. So either they're not tracking, they're not doing it, but for whatever reason, for the end user, the result is the same, is that the public documentation doesn't match the actual product. And that's a real problem because as a user, you end up reading very step-by-step information about how to perform an action, and that is not actually what you see in the product. So it's very, very deceiving. So what we'd like to propose is a way to set up a knowledge base using Notion, which has a lot of benefits, which I'll talk about. But first, I'd like to really explain the two problems. So the first one is outdated documentation, which as I just explained. The other problem is that most often the knowledge-based services, because you've got some services on the web, the problem is that you're going to use a specific service for maintaining a public documentation while you're using another service for your internal documentation. And having two systems is obviously not ideal because you have to jump from one to another. The other problem is that you cannot actually reuse easily information from one system to another. You've got to duplicate information, and duplicating basically means that you're not going to very easily maintaining over time. You're going to lose consistency most likely because someone in your team is going to update one piece and forget to update the other one. Obviously, it's just natural. So if you could use a system that maintains the information in one place but can be used for public or private information documentation, depending on the information at hand, that would be ideal. And I think Notion has this capability. And so I'd like to propose to you to explain how we as Routine, we do that through a step-by-step guide of how to set up a public knowledge base using Routine and how you can actually turn it into something that really looks like a native website, as you can see here. If you know Notion, you know that likely this is a Notion website. But to the kind of normal eye, it looks good enough so that it's not shocking. So let's go. Let's just remove that page. We don't really care, and let's create a new page. We're going to just call that public documentation, something pretty simple. And we're going to start by creating some sections, like, I don't know, like an introduction, I don't know, an overview of the product, let's say, maybe some keyboard shortcut section. Let's say that you've got a lot of keyboard shortcuts, you want to list them in this. And then maybe other things like how to sharing capability, because maybe in your product, whatever it is, you have some sharing capability. Maybe you want to also talk about your company. So maybe some company, investors, FAQ, contact, stuff like that. That sounds pretty normal to have such pages, subsections in a public documentation. Now let's turn all of those into pages, and then let's use again Notion's capability of using a layout with two columns so that it does look like a website, kind of. Now let's start by sharing that page publicly. That's the first step to actually make it as a website. I'm going to disable this option. I would advise you to activate this one if you have a pro account, because that's going to play in your favor in terms of SEO. This one I can't activate now because it's a personal account. And Notion generates a public link that you can use to actually access now this page as a public website. So it's pretty easy. You've got this. Now you can see that anyone can very easily see that this is a Notion website, but we'll change that in the future. Do not worry. Actually, even better, I'm going to create like an anonymous version so that it's even easier. So now that we've got this, let's go back and let's try to make it a bit more, let's add some information to it. So the first thing that we're going to do is sharing, like controlling access to the information, because sometimes not everything that you're writing in those pages, you don't want all of that to be accessible to the public. So let's say that the sharing capability, for instance, is actually not developed yet in the product. So you don't really want that information, still being written. So you don't want that to be shared with the public. So you'd like to keep it private. So what you can do in Notion is very easily restrict, deactivate the sharing here with the public, so that only this page, as you can see, is restricted to your website. I mean, to your main page. It's not really visible. So what I would suggest you do, well, that's what I do, is that I add an emoticon so that I can very easily see here what has been restricted. So in this case, this page, but you can see it here. Now, likewise, if you go to the public page and you reload it, you should have, so it takes some time, the sharing capability disappears. So that's all good. Problem is, the information that you want to restrict is not always a page. Sometimes it's just a line of text that you would like your team to see, but not the rest of the word. So how can you do that? Well, in Notion, and by the time you see that video, maybe that explanation will be completely outdated, but it's possible in Notion because it's powerful. The way they've designed Notion is to use a block as the basic core component, but it's not obvious. So let me show. Let's say that you want to create a call out to explain to your team, be careful, information in those pages have been shared publicly. Something like this. Again, you do not want that call out to be visible to everybody, because that's not the goal. So that would be pretty strange. So what you want is to restrict access just to this block. But as we saw, restricting is only available for pages. You go here, you can't manage the access capabilities, permissions, specifically for this block. At least it looks like it. Let me show you how you can actually do it. So use that copy link to block, then open a new tab. And as you can see, the URL is composed of two parts. There is a hashtag key here. And so you have this part and you have the previous part. So technically speaking, the previous part represents the page. The second part represents the block within the page. And so if you were to remove the pound key plus the part representing the page, you just delete this. So you have Notion.so / the block identifier, and you just press enter. It will load the block, as you can see, as a normal page, which is quite strange. You could actually add even data as a description of that block, which is not how you're supposed to use Notion, but Notion allows it. What interests us here is the sharing capability, which is now available. So you could actually disable access to this block, which is also a page. And if you go back to our page, it doesn't change anything from our internal knowledge base. But if you go to the public version and you reload the page, then automatically, again, it might need to take some time, automatically the block disappears. It has been restricted. So again, this is super powerful because to your team, it looks the same as usual, but you just decide which information is restricted to the public and which is not. Same thing, if you wanted, you could use an icon to indicate that this has been restricted to the public. It's really for you to decide. Now that we've got this, I want to talk about another problem, which is sharing information between multiple places in your knowledge base. Sometimes you want to include the same piece of information in 2 pages. And classically speaking, in any system, you would need to either reference another page. So let's take an example. Let's say that you wanted to say in your company, this is the description of the company, or let's say, I don't know, the product. Those are the founders, and those are the investors, okay? The thing is that, as you probably see, we've created an investor page already. And so if you wanted to say like, we have as investors, I don't know, like Y Combinator, and I don't know, Sequoia Capital, something like this. This information you would need to copy and paste in the company section to have it in 2 places. Problem is, again, if you were to have in the future a new investor, likely someone in your company will come update the investor to say that on top of Y Combinator, maybe you have, I don't know, benchmark. Problem is, the person updating that information is not going to think that you also need to update this section. And so you have inconsistency in your documentation, which is never good because it grows and grows and grows. The other way to solve that problem is to use references, basically to say, if you want to know about our investors, just look at the investor page. And you just do a reference. Please refer to investors. That works very well because the user can just click on the page and it goes to this page, which is going to be updated every time by the person in charge. And so that works. The problem is that it's not a great flow because you have references everywhere. I mean, it works sometimes, but for sometimes you just don't want. You want the person to stay on the one page and read everything related to the topic at hand, which could be the company. Luckily, Notion has a great functionality to solve that problem, which is called synced blocks. Let me show you how it works. The idea is to create a sync block, which is a kind of container which is going to be, again, synced between multiple places. So if you put something in it, like I drag and I drop the text in the sync block, then this block, if I copy it anywhere else, like let's say that this I remove, if I paste it here, automatically, as you can see, there is a red frame around the text. Automatically, this text is going to be updated. I mean, everything in the block is going to be updated and synchronized between the multiple places referencing it. And as you can see, it lists all the places where that information is being used. And so if I were to say that we've also added, I don't know, Techstars as an investor, if I go to the investors now, automatically that place has been, that text has been also synchronized. Likewise, if you were to say, okay, I want to turn it into, I don't know, like a bullet point or something, likewise, you go to the other one, automatically updated, and so on and so forth. So that is obviously super, super powerful. Next up, let's talk about other aspect where you need to maintain consistency across your public and internal knowledge base. Let's say that you have, let's create a new page. Let's say that you have, I don't know, like positions, which is like a table with, I don't know, your open positions like senior front-end developer, maybe a product manager and stuff like that. So basically positions that you want to hire people for. Maybe you have, I don't know, like a manager, which is going to be in charge of hiring that person. And maybe you want to have tags, which represent, I don't know, like stuff like product, maybe engineering, I don't know, stuff like that. Then let's add another one, which would be the candidates. Or let's add another thing here. We could have like the status, which would be if the position is open or closed. Let's say add some color so that it looks good. Something like this. And maybe have another one to add, I don't know, marketing manager. Sorry, open and marketing. Something like that. Now, back to the candidates, we're going to do the equivalent and say, okay, we've got the name. What we want is here is have a relation to the positions, sorry, to the positions and position. And we could say, okay, John Wick, let's say, is applying for the marketing manager, while Henry Ford is applying for the product manager, and Steve Jobs is for the product manager as well. So that we have a basic stuff. So that represents basically information that is maintained internally. I could even go further and say, okay, let's create a new, I don't know, like human resources page, and those two here go there. So that's really internal as opposed to this one, which is public. Now, the problem is that maybe you do want here to have a jobs page for people to see the pages, sorry, the positions that are available in your company. Problem is, again, you would need to duplicate information between what you are maintaining internally and your public knowledge base, which is living in another system. But thanks to Notion, you can use another powerful system, which is called linked database view, where you could just create a view on the positions. And then you could actually filter out all the information that you don't want to expose to the public, like the manager, you probably don't want to show that. The tags, maybe that's not relevant. The candidates, definitely is not something you want to show. The status, probably not either. But what you would like also to not show is the positions that have been closed. It doesn't make any sense. So you probably want to filter out all of those and keep only the open one. That's it. What you've done is decided to expose some information that you already maintain internally and to show it to the public. That's, again, very easy to do with Notion and very powerful. To reload twice, yes, and that's it. Now, interestingly, it doesn't show up. So why is that? Well, it's quite logical. And actually, if you go here, no, it doesn't show here, but it could, is that even though this page is shared, the position is not. The table has not been shared with the public, so it cannot be accessed from another public page. So you would need to activate the sharing of that page as well, that database, so that the page job, which is public, can actually pull information and show it to the public. Once done, again, we can reload. And as you can see, that would be shown to the public. If I open this, I would have access to that information. But again, this is going to be, we're going to deal with this later. Okay, now that we've done that, we can move on to the next aspect, which is a big piece, I think, which most companies fail. I talked about how MailChimp doesn't manage to maintain consistency in terms of the documentation, but also in terms of the visuals. What I mean by this is that the screenshots of the product or even videos showcasing a part of the experience, those ones are going to be completely outdated. And I think there is a way with Notion to make it a lot simpler to maintain. So let me show you how it works. What we do at Routine is that we create an asset page. This asset page is going to be dedicated to maintaining all the product branding assets that we're going to use publicly. And because all of those assets are going to live in one page, it's going to be very easy for the team in charge of maintaining the public documentation consistent to just go through this page from time to time, maybe when there is a new release, and just checking which one of those have been drastically impacted by this new release, so that we would probably need to update it so that it's not shocking to the reader. And so maybe what we could do is create sections with static assets, dynamic assets, or even branding assets if we wanted to. We could do something like this. In the static assets, we could say, okay, let me do something here and reuse those. Let's say that, sorry, we could do something like navigating the app. I should have some stuff here. Yes, let me save some screenshots. This one is static, which is good. And let's do another one in the brand like this one. And this one. Now that we've got our assets, let's go back and let's say that I want to add like the logo of my company. Obviously, you would be using yours, but that's the idea. So let's say that I've got this one as the logo. It's uploading some dynamic asset. I could say, okay, showcase how to do this action. Again, I would add this. So I think it was this one. And I could have the branding was actually down there. And finally, another static asset saying, okay, screenshot of this action. And here, again, we would have this one. Oh, I don't know, like we say inbox. Something like that. Okay. Now that we've got this, the interesting thing is that in our public documentation, we could say, oh, overview of the product. Let's say that I don't know, we have an inbox and we want to use this, and the main action we want to be able to explain as well, and use some text, but also an image. Now, let's say that we want to reuse those. So we could copy and paste. We've shown that with the text, that would be a bad use because it would lead to inconsistencies. But again, we can reuse the synced blocks, which have the same capabilities also with images and videos and any basically anything that Notion manages can be put in a sync block. So in practice, you can even put a sync block in a sync block, even though Notion is not very good yet to display it properly, but technically speaking, it's possible. Now that we've got those, again, we can copy and paste in the knowledge base with some text to explain what we are doing. And likewise, for the dynamic one here, where we could say here in the overview of the product that this can be used. As you can see here, I pasted the image itself, not the block, not the synced block. And so Notion automatically detects that maybe that's not what I mean. And what I'm really interested in is pasting and syncing the block itself, which I'm going to do. Now that I've done this, so the interesting thing is that I could actually use those things in different places. Like this image, let's say that it's a good representation of my product anyway. So I could say, okay, I want to use this here as well in the description of my product. Again, because it's a sync block, if I update the information at one place, it's going to update it everywhere, which is very powerful. So now let's take out the public documentation to see how the public version reacts to what we've added. If I go to overview of the product, as you can see, you've got my sections, but you don't have the images that I've just pasted. And it does make sense because if you go here and you click on the block, you can see the different places where the asset is being used. And as you can see, there is a warning that tells you be careful because the assets page has not been shared with everyone. Again, very simple. You just share it, you deactivate this, you can activate the search engine if you want to, and you are back with this warning gone. So we are all good. If we reload the page, it should be very good now. Yes, loading. So as you can see, we've used the same technique. The big difference here is that from the team responsible for maintaining the public documentation up to date, we've made it even easier because the team at MailChimp, for instance, must go through all the pages, one after the other, checking the text and the images to make sure that, oh, the product might not be up to date. Here, it's all good. In this one, it's all good. Or this one is not up to date, we need to change it, and so on and so forth. With this technique that I just showed you, the team responsible for maintaining the assets up to date only has to go through the assets page. Just going through this page, you just browse very easily and you detect that, oh, this one is not up to date, I need to change it. So what you would do is you click on the image and you would do something like replace. You choose a new one, choose a new logo, for instance, which would be that one. It uploads, and automatically, even though maybe we haven't used it, I don't remember if we've used it in the company page, or we didn't. But if we had, it would have automatically updated without us doing anything. So the beauty of it is that since you've basically created two ways of looking at information, the public knowledge base is structured with different sections. The asset page is just about the assets. And so that's where you, for the team responsible for maintaining consistency, you just look at that. And from time to time, when you have a new release, for instance, you just decide to update those assets. And this way, It's never going to be perfect, but it's good enough so that you at least you have a system to help the team maintain consistency over all of your assets. That's basically it for the first part. Now we have our page, which looks not too bad. I mean, you've got some visuals, you've got some text, you've got information being shared between different sections with the distinct blocks. Again, you have information which is not shared, some pages, some blocks. Now let's give it a bit of a better look so that it looks a bit more natural. So for that, we're going to use a tool called Super.so, which we like a lot at Routine because it allows you to turn a Notion page into a public website that looks pretty natural, and so it's obviously very, very interesting. So you will need to sign in. You will need to create a new site. So let's say, I don't know, public documentation. You would need to give the URL to your Notion page. So go back there, hit share, copy the text here, paste it. And then what Super is going to do is index all the pages in your from your main page and create URLs for every one of those pages. And automatically what is done is that Super generates a public website. So if you click on that, that's how it's going to look like. So it's slightly different from that one. You can see the font is different, the spacing is different. Also, the search and try Notion have disappeared. So already it looks a bit more like a natural website. But Super.so doesn't stop here. First thing, you can obviously change the domain with the Super site, but you can also add a custom domain, which is obviously interesting. This is the basic stuff that I've just set up. I talked about how URLs have been generated from your pages automatically. As you can see, the URLs here were complicated and not very human-friendly. In our case now, if you go to FAQ, the URL is obviously a lot more easy to read. But again, it doesn't stop here. What you can do is that for every page, you can edit the SEO if you really wanted to push it further and make sure that Google or whatever search engine really find your information quickly. Then you have other options what are really interesting. You can change the favicon, you can enable search engine, you can disable, which is by default, the page property and the database view. So I don't know if you remember, but if you go here to the jobs, you were able to open this and see those properties. With Super.so, it's not going to be possible by default. Also, you can activate search within the site, which again is nice because it allows users to search automatically in your website with this. So always a nice thing. I want to point out that Super.so has an approach which is to generate a static website. Sounds a bit technical, but basically what that means is that it crawls your page, your Notion page, and generates a static version of your page. And so that means that there is not, when you update your Notion page, it's not going to be reflected on Super.so as quickly. It could take a few hours for it to update, but it has some benefits, is that loading the pages are a lot faster. Finally, you can add custom code if you want, and also some theme. You can change the font or the colors, stuff like that, but also, and that where it becomes interesting, you can add a custom navbar. So maybe you want to add a link to your home. I don't know, like in our case, for instance, what we do is that we say, okay, we want to add a link to the home. You can change the logo with an image, or you could say, I don't know, like main if you wanted, change the font, etc., etc. And that's basically it. You can add other things, but that's the basic idea, which again is a nice addition for it to look more natural, but also to be more usable. Now let's go back to Notion because I'd like to do one more thing. Now, this is all good. It looks, again, not bad. I mean, you're going to have main here, you're going to have the search, the link to the home. Again, as you can see, if I reload, it does, yes, it does show. It was pretty quick this time. But the problem is that you have those folder or file icons that do not look professional at all. So that would be the next step. So you could use, I don't know, any site, something like, I don't know, icon sets. So you have different websites where you can pick up some icons that you would like to use. And basically with those, you could change the icons so that they look natural. So maybe, I'm not going to be able to do it here, but you would be able to pick an icon set and set those up so that eventually it looks something like this. So in our case at Routine, we did design our own icons, but that's the idea, is that eventually, as you can see, the end result does look very similar to the page that we have here, except that the icons are really look professional, and it changes everything. And so, as you can see, for Routine, we use the exact same techniques that I just showcased in this video, where the assets, for instance, for the branding, it doesn't show here, but this is a sync block with a page dedicated to maintaining our assets. Actually, I can show you. It's this one. So we have a specific page which is shared publicly, as you can see, on Super.so, which includes all of our assets regarding the brand, regarding the product, static, as I explained, with some screenshots, but also dynamic with some GIFs that takes some time to load, as you can see. So all of those have been shared publicly and are reused in the public knowledge base the same way. So if you go to dashboard, you're going to have this GIF, which actually is a sync block with this page, so that again, you don't need to copy and paste and maintain consistency manually. So it's really the same techniques used everywhere. To maybe close it and finish this video, the same thing is true for this one. So I wanted to add a very quick, send us an email if you, I don't know, detect something wrong in the knowledge base or you want to contact us. So it's just a simple footer with a link to, again, another section in our knowledge base. This one you can create very easily. Just to finish with this, you do a call out. You just change the color so that the background is actually like this. You could change, I don't know, like something like this. You type contact us if anything. And then what you do is that you create a sync block. You put that in it. And finally, you just do that and you copy and paste it everywhere in every page. And this way, you have something that looks like a footer on all of your pages without having done anything. And that obviously is always nice. Also, you might think, yes, but it doesn't look very good because it's too close to the rest. Yeah, well, just add some space and just use this, and that's it. You've got some space before, and as you can see, it has reflected everywhere you have this space before, which is exactly the technique that we've used. If you reload here, you will have it. If you reload on Super.so, it hasn't been reflected yet. It will in a few hours probably, or a few minutes. That's basically it. That's how, again, we've built a knowledge base using just Notion, which is the tool that we use for internal information management, project management, everything. We also use it for recruiting, managing support. It's really our main tool for the way we work as a team. But we also decided to use it for managing our public documentation by using the same system I've showcased here, which is sync block, an asset page to centralize all the assets in one place, hiding some pages, hiding some blocks, and using custom icons and Super.so to make it feel like it's something professional. That's it. Don't hesitate to check out Routine, which is a productivity app for professionals and students that combines task management, notes management, calendars, contacts, and is super fast through keyboard shortcuts. Check it out on routine.co. Thank you. Bye-bye.